I'm going to go ahead and get us started, and board member Groneman can join when he becomes available. Good evening and welcome to our Public Works and Safety Standing Committee for March 28, 2022. I'm Melissa Bynum, Commissioner at Large District 1. Before I call the meeting to order, I want to announce that due to COVID-19, some committee members, staff, and the public are attending remotely via Zoom as well as on site. All participants joining by phone should mute their phones when not speaking to avoid background noise. During the meeting, please make sure you announce yourself by name and title when you speak so that the public knows who is speaking, and this is critical given the number of remote participants, and it's also guidance from our Kansas Attorney General. The public is allowed to participate by Zoom or submit comments by email prior to the meeting, and those comments are included in the record of our meeting. The public can also indicate their intent to provide remote public comment by contacting our clerk's office by 5 p.m. the Thursday before the meeting, and the public also has an opportunity tonight to provide brief comment either by phone or Zoom from the lobby of our municipal office building. So I will call our meeting of Monday, March 28, 2022 to order. Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Roll call. Kane.
Here.
Markley.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Ramirez.
Here.
Bynum.
Here. We do have two revisions on tonight's agenda. The revision of documents for item number 2, which is the approval of project prioritization for various grant submissions, and revision of documents for item 6, which is consideration of a grant submission for the Bi-State Sustainable Reinvestment Corridor. Our first order of business is approval of our minutes from our December 6, 2021 meeting. Is there a motion for approval?
Markley move to approve.
Johnson second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Roll call on our minutes, please.
Roll call. Kane.
Aye.
Markley.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Ramirez.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye. The minutes are approved. Under our committee agenda, item number 1 is an intersection safety grant. This is federal aid safety funding from the Kansas Department of Transportation for federal fiscal years 25 and 26. And I will defer to Assistant County Administrator Melissa Bynum. Are you presenting, or will we have Jeff Fisher from Public Works?
I'll have Jeff Fisher take this one.
Thank you very much. Mr. Fisher.
Good evening. Actually, this is all county engineers, so I'm going to let Troy Shaw take this over and highlight this initiative for you. This is Troy Shaw, county engineer. I'm going to share my screen for a quick presentation.
Gentlemen, you're going to have to speak up because we are losing you quickly when you trail off.
Okay, can you hear me? Does this sound good? Okay.
Yes, yes, just speak nice and loud. Thank you.
Okay, I usually don't have a problem with that. So this is intersection safety grant. We received a memo from KDOT about these funds. As you noted, fiscal year federal 25 and 26, the grant is a 90% matching, so 90% federal, 10% local for construction and construction inspection. As with most other grants we do that are federal, design fees are not included in that. So by the time you get done with it, it'll be roughly 70-30 match. The deadline for submission is May 1st. And real quick, I'll go over, these are all the grant requirements. I'm not going to read these in depth, but it's a pretty technical grant. What they're looking at is intersections that are the most dangerous basically throughout the city, and there are requirements behind how you calculate that safety. It's noted here a little bit. This one's unique as in that there's a lot of information that needs to be provided that we are currently looking into. So I don't have the actual intersections I'm going to ask for approval to apply for. we're basically taking all the crash data we can pull from PD and the information we know, volumes on roads, and doing the calculations and putting the work in to see what intersections qualify for the grant requirements, and then what safety factor is behind each one of those and what improvements we can make for a dollar value. So here's just kind of a map of the whole county, and you can see the red dots. The red dots don't really mean anything at this point. They're just a map, and the ones we've looked at, you can see gray dots on there as well. Those are all the other intersections we have that we're looking at as well. So we're pulling a lot of data together to try to figure out which intersections make the most sense. One thing we are looking at with this is we have a lot of signalized intersections, and a lot of those signals are outdated, need additional work. So what we're hoping to do with this, kind of like we are other stuff, is see if we can merge a signal improvement project with an intersection safety improvement project. And hopefully if we can do that and the numbers work out, it fits that way. We have existing funds annually dedicated to our priority traffic signal projects. So we would hope to write the bond description for that, for those projects in whatever year, if we get a grant to cover our matching portion of that. So maybe we could do multiple intersections with those funds as opposed to just a single one, and not only do traffic signal improvements, but also make safety improvements as well. So that's the hope when we put the numbers together and what we're looking to do. As I said, this will be really short. Basically, all we're doing is seeking approval to apply for one or up to four grants at these intersections that determine to be the biggest safety impact we can make for the dollar value we can find. Like I said, I apologize. We don't have those sitting in front of you, but with all the work required behind it and the timeline, we're just putting it together and hoping to get there and make the biggest safety impact in the community. So that's really all I have, and I'm open to any questions.
Mr. Shaw, it's Melissa Bynum. What did you say the deadline was?
May 1st.
Okay. And I know, I have no doubt in my mind that you have the data available to your, team to make the wisest selection for safety. And I believe I heard you say, and I think we've said in prior conversations, that the matching dollars simply could be the money that the unified government has basically budgeted for traffic signal safety, in our annual budget. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And it would be for the federal fiscal year 25-26. So that's not, it's in our budget annually and it's there right now. Obviously that could change since we can update it annually, but that gives us the opportunity to, if we do get a grant for one of these intersections that's signalized, we can write the bond description for that fund to fit that intersection, hopefully getting us maybe 3 intersections out of something we would normally only get 1 out of.
Right. Okay. That was the other comment I was going to make, is if we were to receive the additional funding through this grant, then it just means that our local money goes further.
Correct.
Okay. What other questions or comments for Troy Shaw or anyone on Public Works?
Commissioner Mike Kane, move for approval.
Markley, second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Before we take roll, were there any comments received from the public on the item?
No comments were received.
Is there anyone in person in our lobby with their hand raised to speak?
There is no one in the lobby.
Thank you very much. As in literally no one?
No one.
Okay, thank you very much. Roll call on this motion, please.
Roll call. Kane,
Aye.
Markley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Ramirez,
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye. That motion carries. Thank you very much. Our second item is project prioritization for grant submissions. This is the revised item, consideration of approval of project prioritization for the multiple grants, including RAISE, Safe Streets and Roads for All, mega projects, energy efficiency and conservation, and infra grants. So as I believe we all know and have spoken about on a couple of occasions, this demonstrates the grant opportunities that are in front of us right now. And Jeff Fisher, will you take this, or is this taken by someone else?
Jeff will start us off. I do need Peter Hinkle, who is with Schneider Electric, promoted to panelist at this time.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, Commissioner. I will say, Mr. Groneman has joined us here in this conference room, so I want to recognize him.
Speak up, Jeff.
Commissioner, Mr. Groneman has joined us here in our conference room. So I want to
Oh,
recognize-
that's excellent. Hello, Tom. Thank you for getting there in person.
Hi,
okay.
Melissa.
Hi. All right, Jeff, go ahead and talk as loudly as you possibly can.
Okay, I will. Well, as we've discussed for going on 3 years now, PCK, Wyandotte County, has a lot of infrastructure needs. And so tonight we're going to talk about several opportunities centered around streetlights and streets and bridges. And as you know, next slide, please. An infrastructure subcommittee made up of commissioners and staff was commissioned in August last year, and been meeting ever since. And right now we're at a point where we have a draft document of commissioners' desired outcomes and strategies. That final document is still a few months away, but we thought we have a few outcomes that are really solid that we can go ahead and reference them for this presentation. And as you can see, 3 of those, this isn't all of them, there are many, but 3 of those are relevant tonight. One of the outcomes is a streetlight system that's fully modernized by 2030 to increase the bridge sufficiency index rating in several different categories, both in major structures and minor structures, bridge structures. And then the UG has developed actionable plans for replacing and retiring major bridges when their sufficiency index reaches 60. So the subcommittee hopes that we will be proactive in that way regarding these major structures. So tonight, next slide. Tonight, we're going to present 2 projects to target construction projects, streetlights and a bridge. And then Melissa Stevens is going to highlight several different planning grants that we want to recommend. So next slide, please. Regarding streetlights, Peter Hinkle with Schneider Electric, we've been working with that group for quite a while, trying to figure out what solutions look like, trying to find that funding solution. And so Peter's been with us for a couple of years now, and he's going to highlight the next few slides, and then we'll move on to Bridge with Troy Shaw.
Thanks, Jeff. Good evening. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Hopefully. Good.
Yes.
Well, this is Peter Hinkle with Schneider Electric, and just going to be kind of talking through, I'm sure a few of you all have heard kind of our discussions or talking points here, but I'll try to make this brief and just highlight a few of the things that we're working on behind the scenes. But as far as the streetlights project overall and the scope, it's really centered on kind of 3 core areas. It's the current streetlight system that's in place and modernization of that street lighting system. It's expansion of that street lighting system as well, and really creating a safer road and pedestrian walkways within the city and within the county as a whole, and really developing then kind of a smart cities infrastructure centered along the streetlights and how we can better leverage those current streetlight assets in terms of the unified government's use, and just how they're becoming more modern in terms of new LED street lighting and the upgrades that go along with that. Really the goals of this project have kind of maintained throughout the past year or two when working with Jeff and Melissa and the entire staff. It's been driving kind of safety as a whole. I mentioned that as far as pedestrians as well as roadway safety, but also just the system reliability. We've noticed that a lot of the lights in terms of their spacing and how they're operating, it just becomes a real challenge. And I think we really want to work with the unified government and the BPU to redesign and relook at how those systems are being utilized and maximize them to the fullest. Additionally, there's a huge portion of this project that really centers on energy efficiency and operational efficiency across the entire unified government. Reducing streetlights or changing out streetlights from the current technology that's there to an LED system is in the ballpark of about 40 to 75% just on the energy cost reduction and use of energy within those new lamps and those luminaires. And so when you really think about it, it's a significant value while at the same time improving the overall streetlights as a whole. If you kind of want to go to the next slide. So this kind of gives you a general sense of how the project shaped up in terms of cost and savings. You know, right now we're kind of budgeting a high level of anywhere between $40 and $50 million for this type of work. And again, that's not just LED lighting, but it's also expansion of the lights. It's developing that solution as a whole, and it's really looking at the additional poles that are going to be needed to create a more safe and sound environment here within the unified government. When you look at the overall savings and the potential that's there, you can kind of see, just working from left to right there on the bottom, it's about $1.5 million worth of energy cost savings, about $400,000 or so of maintenance and operational cost savings, and then obviously the reduced total price of around $2 million. And over a 20-year lamp life cycle, 2025 is about average, you're looking at upwards of $52 million coming back to the unified government. And really what we're trying to do is find a way to help fund this project. It's kind of been the stalemate, if you will, in terms of moving this process forward. But really with the infra grants, with RAISE, with a bunch of the grants that Melissa will hit on here in just a little bit, there's a great opportunity for the unified government to leverage the federal dollars that are available and be able to reinvest that back into your infrastructure. So with that being said, if there's any questions, happy to answer. Otherwise, you guys can move on to the next topic. And I think the next is a bridge discussion. So.
This is Troy Shaw, county engineer. I'll hop in real quick on the Kansas Avenue Bridge. So the Kansas Avenue Bridge, which is also the Cesar Chavez Bridge as you get into Missouri, is currently one of our lowest rated bridges that we have from a structural standpoint. We've recently, I think it actually was closed today for evaluation. And then for the last few days has been closed again for evaluation. We had to do some minor repairs and monitoring on it this year. We've been in discussion with City of Kansas City, Missouri, on and off for the last year and a half about the need to possibly replace this bridge. Kansas City, Missouri side is on this, in the same opinion as us, that they need to look at that. It's pretty much in the same condition on their side as it is on ours. This bridge carries about 7,000 vehicles a day, major connection between KCK and KCMO. There's quite a bit of development going on right now, as most of us know, around that side of the river and with the levee project. The estimate for this is somewhere between 35 and 70. A massive disparity, but it all depends on what you want to build back if it comes down and it gets redone. There's opportunities to reduce it, make it larger, put pedestrian accommodations on it. There's all kinds of things that we could do with it, and that discussion has been had with KCMO. So what we would do with this bridge, we would look for complete street improvements for a bridge. Let's use that terminology. LED lighting, multimodal accommodations. Do we need a bus transit through here? How does this tie into the connecting streets on our side, as well as working with KCMO on their side and see how that all fits together to help make a connection, not just for vehicles, but for bikes, for transit, for pedestrians, especially with the levee system that's coming up right now, and we'll see major improvements on in the next few years. So that's just one of the projects we're looking at in conjunction with Kansas City, Missouri, and we feel would probably score pretty well on some of these larger grants, given that we'll have two major cities with crossing two state lines and a major connection between the two. So I will pass it on to the next slide.
Melissa Bynum.
Yeah, I believe this comes over to me, and I just want to comment. We have lots of bridges, as the subcommittee that's been working on streets and bridges has been discussing, that are of concern. And I know that the Central Avenue Bridge is another one that is sitting out there that we want to talk about. There's multiple different angles to take on all of these. And one of the big concerns we have is looking at things from a corridor perspective. And that's what we're going to talk about here. and also looking at our other partners, as we noted before, Kansas City, Missouri. And in many cases throughout our community, this would be the Kansas Department of Transportation and Federal Highway and the Kansas Turnpike Authority. So just talking about corridor improvements, over the last number of months, our planning department, Gunnar Hand, who would be here tonight, but due to some personal issues is not able to be here, would want to walk through these slides with you. And this is all coming out of the GODOT study, which we've been doing, which is a transportation study looking at all the different modes of transit that people can use. And I want to highlight all of these for those of you who haven't attended a GODOT presentation, because what we're looking at with these corridor improvements is the need to do intensive planning around sort of what the streetscape and what other infrastructure improvements would be needed to accommodate the different modes that we would be looking at from a complete streets perspective, but also looking at our underground infrastructure as well as possibly, again, street lighting, what that looks like, planning those spaces, but then taking those interactions with our community to a design level, which is where we have our gaps with the federal government. I want to make that really clear. Many of these grants are for construction, which means you already have engineering, and we will not compete well without that. So let's just go through these and I'll kind of explain to you the rationale. So 7th Street, Missouri Road to Shawnee Mission Parkway, again, major corridor partnerships here would be not only with Westwood, but also Kansas City, Missouri, possibly looking at some of the linkages we have, not only with the ATA, but also future streetcar expansion. State Avenue, Minnesota Avenue from Village West to the Viaduct. Obviously, there's been a lot of interest in this over the last 20 years in this community, but there's more opportunity there as well. Central Avenue, again, looking at everything, including the Central Avenue Bridge, but also working with KDOT and the 670 connection, which is critical to them as that piece of infrastructure is aging as well. And then taking that, obviously, to the state line as we move forward along with that, but also into the Park Drive neighborhood as well. Kansas Avenue, again, these are I-70 state line. We're looking at these comprehensively because we want to understand what's needed throughout the community as these roadways traverse across the county. And again, this starts with Cesar Chavez or Kansas Avenue Bridge through Armourdale, which we are completing current planning studies on. And then, of course, levee trail connections. But it also takes us out the K32 corridor as well. So Caw Drive, Park Drive, 18th Street to Bonner Springs, that's kind of leads off of the Kansas Avenue discussion. And then we work down into 18th Street was another one that has been recommended. I know there's some questions on all of these about sort of level of intensity, but we would work through the GODOT finalization and then the prioritization with the community and the commission going forward. But if we don't have planning details or engineering design, we can't kind of determine the stack going forward on these. 10th Street, Argentine, 12th Street, Quindaro to Metropolitan Avenue, another area where we just have a lot of needs related to bridge replacements and bike facility connections as well. And then here we go, Quindaro Boulevard to James Street, Riverfront Heritage Trail connections. We did just receive an earmark through David's office that we put in for a year ago that will help with some of the trail connectivity from Caw Point Park, but we also have a major opportunity in this area to enhance it for future redevelopment and infill as well. K5, Leavenworth Road, 635 to 7th Street. This is just all these connections you can see here. And then Quindaro from 3rd to 27th, complete streets. So these are all ones we don't have design on. Next slide. Any questions on those so far? I got more.
Melissa, it's Melissa Bynum. If you would just step back to the slide you were just on.
Thank you.
All of them, obviously, I think we can all visualize and recognize the needs. Our community has no shortage of those. I've been the one chairing the Public Works and Infrastructure Subcommittee that is touching on the topics we're on tonight: street lights, bridges. So, I might have had more in-depth conversations with our other subcommittee members and public works staff, but suffice it to say that it's baked in with me now. And I think I can speak somewhat for Commissioner Ramirez as well. When you spend the kind of time that we have spent diving into these infrastructure committees such that we have, we certainly have no doubt of the enormity of the need. And on this slide, I just had a question on specifically the 18th Street from Johnson County to K5, because KDOT has done a lot of work on that particular item. Is that not correct? I mean, that one,
I can explain that if you'd like, Commissioner.
just if you could briefly, we've spent quite a bit of time on that. Those commissioners who any part of that 18th Street stretch cuts through their district, we've been in meetings with not only KDOT, but Benish. So yeah, if you could talk a little bit just about that.
Yeah, and I'm going to specifically talk about the connection between I-70 and basically the Argentine area.
Right.
This is one where there's a bridge replacement slated over the Kansas River, and currently there is no multimodal component to that. And that is something that we see a need to delve into further, and KDOT is willing to have those conversations with us if we're looking at things more holistically. And I guess I would defer to Troy or Jeff as well if there's anything they wanted to add as far as the rest of the whole length. But it's looking at sort of what that is and how we address other infrastructure challenges that we have in that corridor as well. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you. Commissioner, you're right. Benish and KDOT have been here at least once or twice in the past 3 years. They are actually making arrangements to visit with commissioners again here very soon to give you an update on where they're at with that bridge project. And actually I have Chris Harker here behind me from Benish, who's here to help with any technical questions around these bridge discussions. But that is, I believe, has been limited to that river crossing. And so what we're talking about now is, look at that whole corridor to see where those updates and those opportunities could be, and meet community expectations. We just believe it's a very important thoroughfare for the long term.
Okay. Well, that's really all I had on that. And I appreciate it. Melissa, if you want to continue.
So I'm going to go ahead and finish up on these next few, but then we have Parallel Parkway in relation to Jersey Creek. That's again, going back to combined sewers and separations, but do also want to mention that we did just receive an earmark to do a limited scope engineering design in the Douglas Sumner area that we had submitted a little over a year ago. And those earmark dollars will be coming down to us as well. But again, looking at how the environmental side of, watershed across these neighborhoods also impacts other related design as far as, roadways and things of that nature. So all very important. Again, Southwest Boulevard, Merriam Lane, and then Turkey Creek Trail extensions, as well as connections to 7th Street and the new levee trail system. And then Washington Boulevard, which we're starting some work around Big 11 Lake, but this is just kind of the right sizing component of the infrastructure. When we're talking about corridors, we're really looking at things comprehensively. And again, we've adopted a complete streets ordinance, but now we need to do that kind of dive into the ones that are listed here to really understand what that looks like for our community and how we implement those and what the design elements would be and the engineering aspects that we want to deploy. So again, these are opportunities to get these things basically lined up and get some stuff sitting on the shelf, which we desperately need. And to also address, as this notes here, things like ADA accessibility, which we obviously are working to attain, conversion of our streetlight infrastructure, and also just improvements of driving surfaces, as well as landscaping. Those aesthetic improvements that when we make them cause folks to want to reinvest in their neighborhoods and have a better feeling of safety and overall security within our community. So basically, mentioned this earlier, but this is as in relation to the GODOT study, which again, Gunnar may have done a better job on this than I, but it's a very wide scale request. And what we're trying to do is look at one of these grants coming up that we're going to talk here in the next slides. Go ahead, thank you. So grant opportunities. Jeff, I am covering this, correct?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. So this is where it gets fun and where it gets a little complicated, but wanted to walk through this. As was noted by Commissioner Bynum, there are multiple requests out there. In fact, I just received another one today, which merges 3 of the ones into one set of applications, which we will work with the federal government on to determine which is the best one for whatever we're submitting. But when we talk about the RAISE grant, which is the first one listed here, there's 2 things that we're looking at. And the second presentation or the third presentation tonight, which will be done with our partners at the Mid-America Regional Council, we'll talk about a planning grant for RAISE. And planning grants allow you to kind of do a study in and around the environmental analysis of the area or corridor identified, equity analysis, community engagement, feasibility studies, other pre-construction activities and cost estimating, as well as any required right-of-way acquisition. So these grants, RAISE grants, are very powerful, and you can submit up to $25 million for those, either for construction or for planning, which is unheard of. So this is something we're really focusing on. The first focus is going to be for the unified government, if approved tonight, for us to submit a planning grant with all those corridors we just addressed in the last 2 slides, that allows us to get things to what we would call shovel ready. And that's really critical for communities to get to that phase with their engineering and design. But it also allows for all that community engagement that we desperately need on these projects before we would even go to submit for construction. We want to bring people into the conversation, help us understand what they're looking for in their community, and then be able to get that down and have them react to those kinds of designs and have that engagement in the neighborhoods. So that is one grant that we're looking to do. And then the one with Mark is a similar type of grant, but it's going to be for this bi-state corridor that we'll talk about next. The Safe Streets for Roads on All. Again, this kind of goes back to that multimodal concept. I don't know that we've identified anything particularly for this yet, but we are looking at it. It is a to be determined timeframe, but I think it's probably one of the ones that's going to be coming open in mid-May for submission. Next slide, please. The one that just came out today is one of these projects that's considered as a cluster, mega projects, and then another one called Infra, which I believe is the old Tiger grant. And then also last one called Rural. We will qualify for all of those to submit. Again, these are, again, ones that look at these multimodal components and impacting safety as well. Turner Diagonal, as example, was funded out of something similar, but it was the Tiger process at the time. So these are due May 23rd. We just found that out this afternoon, literally. And we are obviously looking to submit some projects out of this as well. Whether or I don't believe we are able to do anything other than construction out of those. So that's going to be a bit of our challenge at this time. Does anybody know if I'm missing that on these? Because I don't know. Can you do design and construction with mega or infra? Troy,
Yeah, I believe that's the case.
talk louder because
Right.
Yeah, with the build grant, we did design, we did it as alternative delivery, but there was
Yeah.
design and construction within that, so.
yeah. So what Troy is saying is that there's the possibility of kind of like the design bid build or alternative delivery models that we could deploy with these, given that we do not have a shovel ready project per se at this time. The next one, these energy efficiency grants are similar to some of the stuff Peter Hinkle was just discussing with us. There are other opportunities we will be looking at with these, with buildings and logistics, as well as other infrastructure related matters, which could, be with our wastewater plant or other areas where we can find that we're able to apply these dollars and successfully reduce our footprint. So next slide. Again, these two similar types of things, but a lot of these may go through the KCATA for us to apply, or perhaps Mark. But when we're looking at the bus facilities, Justice Wilker, I believe, is on here tonight, or he would be on here tonight. Sorry, I'm also filling in for him. I forgot I'm wearing multiple hats today. And these are things we'll be looking at also along with our fleet division within Public Works. Jeff, is there anything you wanted to say on any of that?
No, you're covering it well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up. And this is where the conversation starts for us, because we are just really curious to talk to you about some of our items that we just presented and kind of get some blessings for us to start building these massive grant applications. Jeff, are you planning on taking this from here?
Yeah, I can take it from here. Thank
Okay,
you.
but you may need to stand up and get as close to that mic that you're using as possible, because it is really hard to hear.
Okay, I'm sorry. So to sum it up tonight, to sort of simplify things, streetlights, there will be 2 or 3 opportunities to get funding for a streetlight project. A few of those were mentioned earlier. We're pursuing up to $50 million. And essentially, whatever the UG is successful and receiving, we'll start in the eastern third and then work west with whatever money we have. But we'll focus initially on the eastern third. And then on the Kansas Avenue Bridge, we'll probably pursue 2 or 3 programs there as well. She mentioned Infra Grant and Mega, and there's probably 1 or 2 other opportunities, right? And that grant request will be up to $70 million, as we mentioned earlier, not to include Casey Mo's portion. And then next slide. And then, as Melissa covered very well, there are many grant opportunities, or many opportunities to receive planning grants through the RAISE program. I think they may have mentioned. There you go. So on those planning grants, the RAISE grant we discovered along the way is only available for shovel-ready projects. Otherwise, we would have been talking about construction on maybe a Quindaro project or the like. But RAISE is limited to construct shovel-ready or planning grants, as Melissa highlighted. So what we're recommending is pursue RAISE grants up to $25 million for that long list of projects. And we attempted to set this item up, package it in a way that led to efficiency in pursuing all these opportunities. So we hope it's not real confusing. Try to simplify it and streamline it and give the UG the ability to be nimble and efficient moving through this process. That's all we have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That's quite a bit. Let me see here. I have a hand up. Who is it? I have 2 hands up. I have Lavert Murray from Mayor Garner's office and followed by Commissioner Ramirez. Mr. Murray?
Thank you, Commissioner. Could we go back to the previous slide? Where, yes. On the bridge replacement, we would certainly like to see the Central Avenue Bridge included in this initiative. As you may know, Commissioner, we've had discussions with Casey Moe, not so much Casey Moe, but Congressman Cleaver, and there is a desire to move that Central Avenue Bridge, which is currently closed, up in priority. And Congressman Cleaver believes we can, with a higher priority, receive federal funding that would help replace that bridge. So just wanted to point that out.
Mr. Murray, it's Melissa Bynum. I understand what you're saying, and I was there with you when we had that conversation. I am curious, I think it's a slide prior even to this, that we simply make sure we include that in basically the long list. And what we're hoping for here, if I understood correctly, is to get planning and engineering ready, which helps us to secure construction money when those grant opportunities come along. So I am certainly not disagreeing with you. And the Central Avenue Bridge could be added to this list. And I appreciate the notion that we have support, we believe, in the form of our Kansas Congresswoman and our Missouri Congressman in terms of helping to secure federal dollars for that. But I just want to be clear with the commission, this particular standing committee, that yes, while we can add that bridge through our infrastructure subcommittee work that I've been engaged with Commissioners Townsend and McKiernan, who are not on this standing committee, that particular bridge isn't necessarily ranked high among our professional staff that analyzes, what absolutely must come first. So I don't struggle with including it, especially if we believe that some form of dollars could come through our elected representations efforts. I just
Commissioner
want to
Bynum, it is included in the corridor improvement
Excellent.
component.
Okay, excellent.
It's not excluded. It's part
Okay.
of that. It's
That's-
critical. We work with KDOT on that as well.
I think that's really important. And certainly not to take away from anything else on the list. Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Commissioner Bynum. As always, thank you, Melissa, Jeff, and all the public works staff. Thank you for everything you do with the little that you have. Last year, our previous mayor, Mayor Alvey, made the announcement of creating these infrastructure and subcommittees so that we as a commission could be right alongside you and try and find a way to fix our infrastructure. And so we've spent months in my committee. Commissioner Markley sits on the committee that I chair, and Commissioner Bynum and Commissioner Johnson, we've all been part of the conversation. And you said it perfectly, Commissioner Bynum, we all know that our needs are many and our resources are very few. And it's going to take, we're going to have to leverage outside dollars to to make a dent in our infrastructure. So personally, I say let's apply for any grant that we can, any grant that's possible that's going to get us to somewhat of a finish line. And I know we're going through budget season right now. I can tell you I will not support any drastic change in budget that will hinder or stop our progress in our infrastructure. So I'm standing by our subcommittees. I'm standing by all the conversations we have had as a commission and staff together in these subcommittees. I think we should, like I said, apply for any and all grant opportunities that we have, because that is the only way we're going to be able to progress in any way, shape, or form. So thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the information. I know it is a lot, but it unfortunately with grants that they come and go very fast, and so you have to act pretty quickly when they come. So thank you for being able to put all of this together and to synthesize information as best as you can. And let's hopefully we have some good luck with these grants and that we can get some good change in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Markley.
Thank you. I agree with Commissioner Ramirez, and I just want to kind of jump on to a point he made there at the end, which is that, this information is coming quickly and the grants are evolving quickly. And I agree with the items on this list. I also want to make sure that staff has the ability to adapt to things that are coming out in a strategic way. So we know sometimes if you just throw everything at the wall, the thing that sticks might not be the thing that's the highest priority. So I guess what I'm saying is I just want to make sure that staff has the ability to strategize if they feel like that's necessary as these grants are coming down. It doesn't always make sense to apply with everything on the list. Depending on how the grants are going to be figured out, we may want to prioritize. So I don't know exactly how it looks or how that sort of comes down the pike. But as we approve these, I want it to be in a way that allows staff that flexibility to say, well, now they're only saying we get to apply for this many, or now there's only this much money available, or there's been a change in requirements, so we need to make this list fit those. So I don't know what that motion looks like exactly, but I want to make sure that whatever flexibility is required is there.
Melissa Bynum, go ahead.
I just want to make clear, this is not our typical method or means for coming to you with individual grants. The timing is the problem that we're seeing, and we intend to, I asked the interim administrator to allow us to come before the governing body on commission meeting nights to do any updates as we try to pivot. We are going to cast the net in the way that helps meet all of the competing priorities the best that we can. We're looking at trying to stack these in the most effective way. And I will tell you that we are working with our partners. Again, just to make that very clear, those partners are KCATA, which Commissioner Bynum chairs now, the Kansas Department of Transportation, and the Kansas Turnpike Authority, as well as with the other municipalities that are adjacent to us, which there are many. And so I think that all of those play into stronger grant submissions when we show that we're working in coordination, in conjunction. And if we step outside of that, we could not have as strong of an application. And I think that's where staff is really working, trying to help all of the governing body be successful in receiving dollars and getting them into the right alignment.
And Melissa, I would include Mark in that listing of partners as well, who will and is willing to help us in the on the planning side.
Absolutely. I mentioned him earlier and I didn't mention him again. So thank you, Lavert. I appreciate that.
And I think that was very well said. And I guess the word is nimble. So with that said, yes, who's speaking? I can't.
Jeff Fisher.
Yes, sir.
I want to get clear direction. The idea of Central Avenue Bridge came up. Is there alignment among standing committee to, first to give staff direction to pursue opportunities to replace Central Avenue Bridge like Kansas Avenue Bridge?
I would say, let's hear from this committee. And I'm going to go back to my earlier statement of knowing, again, what I've been taught through our deep work with your staff, Jeff, on the data, that while I do not disagree with including it on the list, I do also have an understanding that it is not a top priority inside our communities. In other words, it wouldn't be number one. There are bridges that are in front of it. Commissioner Ramirez and then Commissioner Markley, go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner Bynum. I would personally say that I guess I'm going along on the lines of what Commissioner Bynum said. We also have to keep in mind, we still have the infrastructure bill funding that is still, we don't know how much is yet going to come to us. That could help with bridge repair if that's what it takes in the future. But I don't want us to keep adding to the list, and it puts our application in jeopardy. We have this calculated strategic list of projects that are needed and throughout the community. I just don't want to keep adding to it. Again, I don't want to repeat, but jeopardize our application in the end. That's my only thought about the adding the Central Avenue Bridge.
And I will say it is there. If you look at the third bullet point on the slide we're looking at, it does say includes Central Avenue Bridge and 670 with support of KDOT. These also have KDOT components. So it's there. Commissioner Markley?
Yeah, I agree. I think we know this is a priority list, not the full list. We know there are many, many, many things that we would love to have on this list because we want them, but that are not necessarily priority or not priority because they are not anticipated to be good grant candidates. So I'm comfortable with the list as presented by staff.
Thank you. Commissioner Johnson? Oh no, did we lose him? Commissioner Johnson, you are muted.
Yes, I'm sorry. Good grief.
Okay, there you go. You're good.
Slide 7 and slide 15, both. When I read through this, I saw that Central Avenue Bridge was identified in both of those. So I assumed that included the items that Mr. Murray was referring to. Maybe I'm not understanding it correctly, or misunderstanding what was there. But I thought when I saw those there, that did in fact include the Central Avenue Bridge. So I thought we were good in that regard. So if I'm wrong, just please correct me.
I don't think you're wrong, Melissa Bynum.
No, Commissioner, you're not incorrect. What we are looking at is how we would attack that from a planning and an engineering perspective. There is a desire by Kansas Department of Transportation to talk to us, KDOT, on how that intersects, as you'll see on the slide that's before you right now, second or third bullet point, the indented bullet under it, which is how that ties into 670. As you are all aware, when you traverse Central Avenue towards Kansas City, Missouri, that bridge is a multifaceted pieces, and it ties into what we refer to as a Central Avenue Bridge. But at the end of the day, they all come together. And I'd love to have Troy Shaw talk bridge with you, because now I'm getting way outside of my bailiwick. But what I can tell you is they're interconnected and there's dependencies. Troy?
Yeah, I mean, to what Melissa said, the portion of the bridge that is closed right now, if you go to the side of it, you can see the difference in the structure. And that's the one that was built in the early 1900s. But as you go west of that bridge, then it basically is just a connection to KDOT more or less to I-670 and then ultimately to Central Avenue and 7th Street as you go west. So yeah, it really all connects together, but the portion that is closed right now is strictly the portion over the river, is the part that's unsafe right now.
So we will keep it right where it is. It's in the mix and it's part of the work. And with regard to any other portion of this, are there other questions or comments? Madam Clerk, have we received any comments from the public on the item?
No comments were received.
Thank you. Is there a motion on this item?
Commissioner Markley, move to approve.
Commissioner Harold Johnson, second.
Thank you very much. We have a motion and a second on the item. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Groneman. Groneman,
Aye.
Kane,
Aye.
Markley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Ramirez,
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye. Thank you very much. Excellent discussion. I really appreciate it. Very exciting to have that level of opportunity in front of us. Item 3 is an ordinance amending chapter 35 of our traffic code, article 5, speeding regulations. We have Casey Meyer from legal, and I did not see Chief Oakman, but I did see Major Pruitt. Is she promoted? If not, let's promote Major Pruitt. And Casey, go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner. This is Casey Meyer with the legal department, and Major Pruitt and I are going to be presenting to you. We have a short PowerPoint, so I'm going to share my screen. And are you able to see that?
No, not yet.
Major Pruitt, are you able to share it on your side?
Yeah. Let me see if I can't get it shared. Are you able to see that?
Yes.
Okay.
This is Casey. Okay, sorry, we were hoping that you could hear the audio better, but if you were able to hear audio, you would have been able to hear gunfire during that. So that would have been nice for you to been able to experience that. But Major Pruitt is going to explain some of the issues that the police department has been dealing with recently.
Yeah, so my apologies. I wish you could have heard that. So not only was there gunfire, but there were different munitions used, which means that there were multiple people in these intersections participating, watching this sideshow that had weapons at this event. And this event that you did see was actually down in Fairfax. And this is just one of the one weekends or days that this has happened. So we have had a homicide in relation to one of these side events. Not only shootings, but there's also injuries. When you see these sideshows, you see people standing in the middle of these intersections, you know, trying to videotape, getting as close as they can to the cars. And we have had individuals get injured by that as well. So we know that these street races and these side exhibitions are on the rise. And not only is it us having these issues, but it's also Kansas City, Missouri. We are in constant contact with them about these sideshows. And a lot of times they're going to cause property damage if they're going into parking lots. And then we do get a lot of calls on this. They're impeding traffic as well. People that are just trying to get to and from are being blocked. What these individuals will do will actually block an intersection completely and then not allow any traffic through. So, and they could be there anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. And so we've had a lot of issues with trying to combat this because unfortunately, we're not able to keep up to speed on where they're actually going at all times. So these are some of the issues that we've come across with the police department.
So because of that, the police department requested that I amend our current ordinance, which currently just addresses racing on highways and exhibitions of speed. The sheriff's office, Sheriff Soptic, also is supportive of this. And so what I did based upon their request is, of course, I did research about how other jurisdictions are handling it. Several states have passed legislation, including statutes, which have added spectators to the list of people who can get an infraction if they engage in this activity, including sideshows. So I amended our current ordinance to include sideshows specifically, just to make sure everybody was aware and on notice that sideshows are prohibited. Next slide, thank you. And then I added a section, and the reason it's red is because this is the red line version, which is all the new language is in red, which includes language prohibiting being present as a spectator at any of those previously prohibited events, including a sideshow. And then a new section C, which prohibits being a spectator where preparations are being made for any of those previously prohibited events, including a sideshow. And then, of course, we have to know what a sideshow is. So we defined sideshow. In case you don't know what a sideshow is, it's an informal demonstration of automotive stunts, which includes donuts, which is what you saw in the video, and ghost riding, which includes people hanging out of the side of the car. And then our definition of spectator is, as you see on the screen. We obviously don't want to include someone who just happens to be in the area accidentally. This is someone who is purposefully there. And with the language of our ordinance, it's who purposefully demonstrates through active encouragement, assistance, facilitation, urging, promotion, or request that any of those previously prohibited events, including a sideshow, either commence or continue. And again, unintentional witnesses or passersby to these events would not be considered spectators. So in that video, it'd be the people that you can clearly see engaging and encouraging the activity in the middle of the street. I also included some exceptions we have to have the ability for our law enforcement officers to be there. And so I accepted them out of this ordinance as long as they're there in the course of their official duties. And then, of course, an exception for any races or sideshows that occur on public or private racetracks, which are intentionally built or specifically created for the purpose. And then as far as our penalty, previously for racing and exhibitions of speed, whatever our original ordinance was, that was already a Class C misdemeanor. These two new prohibitions regarding the spectators are infractions. And infractions are punishable by a fine only, which means that they are not arrestable offenses. But it does mean the police department can give warning citations or tickets, which then would require the person to show up to court. And that's it. So the police department is requesting the amendments, your approval for these amendments, and the legal department is approving as to the form.
Thank you
Are there
very
any
much. Thank you so much. Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Commissioner Bynum. Thank you, Major Pruitt and Casey. Could you go back to the definition for spectator? Because I have a question. Let's say, because I know it says unintentional witnesses or passersby. Let's say someone's passing by and they become part of the group and they become part of the cheering on, the promoting and all of that. Would they then be considered a spectator?
I would say yes. And Major Pruitt, if you want to go further on how most of these people arrive to these events, feel free to add.
Yeah, so when these events are people usually sometimes even from out of town. They may not even be Kansas City, Kansas residents. So they are driving in groups here. They are actively intentionally blocking streets so that nobody can get through. And if they are encouraging this, if they are out on the side watching this take place, whether, if that's on the inside of this, where the car is driving around them, or if they're on the outside, videotaping for purposes to promote the event and not purposes to call police, that would be considered a spectator. They are encouraging it, they are facilitating it, and they are not doing anything to request police assistance to these events.
Okay, thank you. I agree with this. I agree with the ordinance and its whole and the changes. I guess it's not a hesitation. It's just a thought of how can I guess it's not hard for. I guess you can attest to this, Major Pruitt. I guess it's not hard for law enforcement to decide who's a spectator and who's not. I'm guessing it's not that hard.
No, and especially when if you do come across these events, there are, numerous people on the inside of these watching these cars go around them and are actively, one of their cars may be assisting with blocking the street. So they are very actively participating in it, cheering, clapping, hollering for them to do more or request a specific type of burnout or a donut, so it's very obvious knowing who is a spectator and who is not. People that are stuck in the intersection, they're not spectators. They're just the ones trying to pass through the intersection or get to where they need to go.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation. That did help. Again, I don't want to call it hesitation, but just a thought. So thank you for the explanation. Thank you for bringing this ordinance over. I know this has been something in the news in KCMO very often lately. And I will say one night I was driving down Maine because I was having dinner at a restaurant and I saw a sideshow get quote unquote busted. So I was hoping that wasn't happening here in our community, but unfortunately it seems that it is. And so if there's anything we can do to keep the health and safety of our community, I thank you for bringing it forward.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Markley.
Yeah, I was just going to comment. at least for the sites that are an issue within my district, the other thing that makes it fairly obvious when somebody's a spectator is they're usually happening not at normal times of day. So it's not like there's a bunch of people walking down the sidewalk, like on their way to work. It's, 2 or 3 in the morning. And if there's a huge group of people gathered, it's pretty obvious what they're gathered for. So I think that just as an example, I think that makes it easier for police to identify whether someone's there for the sideshow, or whether they're just happening by, because it's pretty unlikely they're happening by at 3 in the morning in a large group.
Okay, are there other, let's see here, Commissioner Ramirez?
Sorry, thank you, Commissioner Bynum. I had a previous question that I forgot to ask. How, Major Pruitt, I'm curious, how often do they happen in Wyandotte or KCK? So I'm just curious. That was a question I was going to ask, but I forgot. Thank you.
Yeah, so I can tell you that there approximately about a month ago, we had officers having to come in extra and have work with KHP, and it was an every weekend thing. And so we tried to keep up with locations of where they're going, through social media and stuff, but unfortunately it's difficult to keep up with them, and so or know when it's going to happen. But I will tell you that it was about an every weekend thing, and especially during the summertime when it starts to get nice, that's when it really becomes an issue as well.
Are there other comments or questions from our committee? I do have a question for Casey. I think, is there any need to fast track this to our Thursday night agenda? Actually, that's a value judgment on the part of you and Major Pruitt. If we don't fast track it, when do we see it come to a full commission agenda?
Major, you would know better if there are any events planned. I know that.
I don't know of anything right offhand, and usually we tried to keep up to speed on that. But I don't know anything that would, prohibit us from still trying to deter this type of issue in the meantime before it does get presented before full commission. So.
Okay. Other questions or comments from the committee?
Commissioner Mike Kane, move for approval.
Markley, second.
We have a motion and a second on the item. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Groneman,
Aye.
Kane,
Aye.
Markley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Ramirez,
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye. Thank you. That motion carries. Item 4 is a request for approval on amendments to our UG code provisions relating to open burning. John Khalil from legal is here, I believe, or if not, we have Casey Myers.
I'm here, Commissioner Markley.
Okay.
And before we get started, can we promote, it's Mark Weckworth from the Health Department and Jennifer Stewart from the Health Department.
Thank you.
Yep. Second. I have a presentation for us today. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay. So this is an issue that has come before the standing committee, I think twice before. It's a discussion relating to the open burn permitting process. There's 2 open burning seasons in Wyandotte County. It's the month of April, which is coming up. And then there's an open burn period from October 16th through November 15th. And during that burn period, fires set for the disposal of organic yard waste generated on a property may be permitted between the hours of 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. Our current definition of organic yard waste includes leaves, brush, dead wood, tree cutting, and weeds
that can fit within a 10 by 10 pile and can be burned completely in 3 days between the hours of 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. During these periods, only one permit for a maximum of 3 days per property owner will be issued by the chief of the fire prevention division. And currently, at times, the county administrator may determine that open burning is necessary between the spring and fall periods, especially when there's a large increase in downed trees, limbs, branches, and other difficult to dispose of yard waste. During these time periods, the county administrator may require permits to be obtained to conduct the open burning, and that open burning may comply or must comply with all current county ordinances. Under Wyandotte County Municipal Code Section 317H, there are 3 main types of waste for which permits may be sought. That's non-residential waste, extraordinary organic yard waste, and organic yard waste. Currently, non-residential waste and extraordinary organic yard waste are governed by Wyandotte County Ordinance 317HA, which states that fires set for the disposal of non-residential waste or extraordinary organic yard waste may be permitted when it can be shown that such open burning is absolutely necessary in the public interest and no other method of disposal can be used. Burning of land clearing debris, including trees, brush, and vegetation, is normally considered as being necessary and in the public interest, provided that an applicable air curtain open pit structure of suitable design and capacity is used to accomplish the burning. And then there's an additional permit required to be obtained from the air quality director prior to the use of an air curtain destructor. So this is a picture of an air curtain destructor, and under the current code, burning of non-residential waste and extraordinary yard waste is an option of last resort. And then to mitigate against environmental effects, an open pit destructure is required for non-residential waste and may be required for the burning of extraordinary organic yard waste. Whether or not an air curtain is required for the burning of extraordinary organic yard waste depends on several factors, including the amount of material and nature of material to be burned and the location of the property in which the burning is taking place. Currently, the Kansas Department of Health and Environment's policy allows for open and burning, but it encourages and may require emission controls in sensitive areas or near population centers. KDHE prefers to allow open burning only in a manner that guarantees the least number of people will be adversely affected by the burn. The staff is proposing the following changes to provide greater clarity to both the public and our staff as to what options are available the next time we have a large storm that affects the area. And we're here to get feedback from the commission and make any additional changes that may be requested. So our first proposed modification is to include is to amend section 3-3 to include the following definition of extraordinary organic yard waste. There's currently not a definition of extraordinary organic yard waste in the code. So our definition would be that extraordinary organic yard waste means organic yard waste that cannot be burned within the hours of 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. over 3 consecutive days while being contained to a 10-foot by 10-foot area as determined by the chief of the fire prevention division or their designee. This would include, including this definition in the ordinance would improve transparency and objectivity within the burn permitting process. Our second modification would be to amend section 3-17HA1 with the language below. This would change the code to say that fire set for the disposal of non-residential waste or extraordinary yard waste may be permitted only when it can be shown by a person that such open burning is absolutely necessary and in the public interest. And the change would be that the director may determine whether the burning of non-residential waste or extraordinary organic yard waste, such as trees that are felled by a storm damage, is considered necessary and in the public interest. And the director may also determine what, if any, precautions are needed to ensure air quality standards are maintained. And then it would amend the next sentence to say that the burning of land clearing debris, including trees, brush, and vegetation only, as well as trees and limbs felled by severe weather, shall be normally considered as being necessary and in the public interest. Effectively, what this modification would do is it would give the director of air quality some discretion as to if an air curtain destructor is required when there is extraordinary organic yard waste or non-residential waste that someone wants to burn, rather than under the current language, which the director doesn't have any discretion to determine if an air curtain is needed. Our third proposed modification would just be adding, cleaning up some language, which would be adding or non-residential waste or extraordinary organic yard waste to the definition of an approvable air curtain open pit destructor. These modifications would give the director of the air quality division more discretion to determine when an air curtain is required. Our fourth proposed modification would be to amend section 3-17(2)A to include the language below. It would say that any person intending to engage in open burning of non-residential waste or extraordinary organic yard waste under this section shall file a request to do so with the director or the chief of the fire and the chief of the fire prevention division, and that application shall state the following: the name, address, and telephone number of the person submitting the application, the dates and times of the burning operations, the type, quantity, and composition of the waste to be burned, the exact location where the open burning will be used to dispose of such waste, and a map indicating the nearest hydrants, structures, roads, water sources, power lines, property lines, and burn location within 1,500 feet of the burn location. That same modification will also require them to submit a management plan for igniting, controlling, and extinguishing the open burn. For non-residential waste, extraordinary residential waste, or extraordinary organic yard waste, in addition to the information required above, the type of business or activity involved, a description of the proposed equipment and operating practices, and the expected composition and amount of air contaminants to be released to the atmosphere. Reasons why no method other than burning can be used for the disposal of such waste. Evidence that the proposed open burning has been approved by any fire department that may have jurisdiction. And then under no circumstances shall open burning occur within 50 feet of any building, combustible material, road, or within 50 feet of a property line. All open burning must be constantly attended to until extinguished. All persons conducting open burning shall have available the means for controlling or extinguishing the fire, such as water supply and or heavy equipment, and it shall be unlawful for any person to conduct open burning other than in accordance with the requirements set out in this section or in violation of any conditions or operating restrictions imposed by the director or the chief of the fire prevention division. The fifth proposed modification that we have which would be amending section 3-17HA2I with the language below. This would clarify the county administrator's ability to respond to the needs of citizens to the county after severe weather events. It would include that when severe weather causes a substantial number of felled trees and limbs during periods outside of the current burn months, the county administrator would be able to establish a period of open burning. This is supposed to be proposed modification number 6. I apologize for that. This would amend section 3-17H 6 to include the following language. After a denial of a burn permit under this section, an applicant may appeal their decision to a panel consisting of the director, the chief of the fire prevention division, and the county administrator or their designee by filing a written notice of appeal with the Unified Government's Clerk's Office within 30 days of such decision. And then the panel shall conduct a hearing on the appeal within 30 days of receipt of such appeal. This modification would give folks the ability to appeal why their open burn permit was denied. There's currently no such avenue for folks. This modification would amend section 3-17H1B to include that organic yard waste includes trees felled by storm damage on property zoned either residential or agricultural. And then modifications 7 would amend section 3-17H2C5 to include the words extraordinary organic yard waste, or just clean up some of the language, make the code more clear. And that is all that I have tonight.
Thank you, sir. We have fire department representation and health department representation. Fire Marshal Droppelman, or those of you, I think there's 2, Jennifer Stewart and another gentleman with health. Do you have comments that you would like to add at this time? Commissioner Kane?
I'd rather hear from them first.
Okay. Commissioner, why don't you go ahead, and I've got a question or two myself. And then perhaps with the question you ask, we might hear from the health department or fire department if it pertains.
Can you go back? I don't know if that was slide number 4, the one where you said that you had the wrong number, the one right before that, when it talked about the times and the dates when they were going to do the burning.
Give me 1 second, Commissioner. Sorry. This slide. Is this the slide?
There was a different one that had the actual. Okay. Is that it? The one where it says the administrator changed the dates or something like that, or modify the dates.
I think it's toward the end.
Yes. Oh, let me find it. Sorry.
That'd be
That's it.
proposed
This is
modification
it.
4,
Yep.
All right.
This is it, I
All
think.
I'm asking is, like, we had a storm. That's not a, well, that's, yeah, that'll work.
Yep.
All I'm asking is we had a major storm, and it doesn't happen that often. And one of my constituents had multiple trees down. It was going to cost somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000 to haul those trees off. So he was asking to burn them. There was some sort of situation that the Droppelman showed up with a gun and a taser, which according to the state fire marshal, that you're not allowed to do that. So there was some sort of riff right there. So we started out on the wrong foot. And all I'm asking is to an amendment. It says all agricultural uses should be allowed open burn permits at the time during the year, as long as the air quality is acceptable and the wind is not excessive, similar to what they do in Leavenworth County. It's nothing drastic. I'm not sure why this thing went sideways originally, but and I'm just asking for this amendment, but not asking because you made some great changes, but all the stars have to line up before a person could burn at all. And, you know, if the atmosphere was messed up, they couldn't do it. Wind blowing, they couldn't do it. I think like some of the things you put down, you got to be within 1,500 feet or so from a fire hydrant. All that stuff looks good. I'm asking for one minor change, and I'll repeat it. All agricultural uses should be allowed open burn permits at any time during the year, as long as the air quality is acceptable and the wind is not excessive. Because you don't want to sit there with brush all around your house and not be able to do it until the aligned times that work. And I'll listen to whatever else they have to say.
Commissioner Kane, I have a question. My name is Gail Bergman. I'm the air quality supervisor at the health department. So you say anytime, do you mean anytime when trees are felled from storm, or do you mean if a property owner voluntarily?
No, just a storm.
Okay.
Just a storm.
I just wanted to clarify that.
This has to be specific to a storm. Specific to a storm. I mean, if a one tree blows down or 20 blows down, and everyone knows when there's a storm. Now, you have to remember when this first went through there, staff said it only happened at Parallel. It only went out to 123rd Street, and it only went over to Leavenworth Road. And in fact, it started out at 7 Highway and destroyed some houses and some roofs and some trees and the golf course there at Dubs. So the administrator made a mistake. We had to go to Public Works so they can expand their working area. And I'm asking during a storm situation that the people would be able to clean it up, and not even for storm, if something blew it over, that they be able to remove it. And even though it's not during the regular times, to clear their ground. And it's pretty simple. The air has to be right. All the stars have to line up to make sure it works. And I'm not reinventing the wheel. This is done in other communities, and I'm just trying to get our group to work with as the other groups have.
This is Commissioner Bynum. I feel like the slide we're looking at right now could cover your request, Commissioner Kane. And it would simply need the county administrator to state upon the conclusion of the storm that the burn process is amended or lifted, or whatever the proper wording is, that the burning could occur of the felled trees as a result of the storm. Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Commissioner Bynum. I was just going to second and support the amendment that Commissioner Kane was making.
We can leave that what you're talking about highlighted. I would like this just added to the end, just a final clarification, so everyone understands, because there could be some confusion with this, and I think it's a simple modification that should be allowed.
Okay, so you're suggesting a modification to this section.
Well, it could be right after the where it says November 15th burn period. Just add this amendment to that.
Okay.
Commissioner, this is Misty Brown, Chief Legal Counsel. I do have a bit of a question to try and clarify. I have heard what you're saying, that you're looking for this amendment for agricultural uses, but you do want it somewhat linked to the storm, to a storm thing. Just, am I hearing that if you are agricultural and a severe weather caused a substantial felled number of trees, then the agricultural owners would not necessarily need to get approval by the county administrator. They would just automatically be allowed to burn so long as air quality control, air quality was acceptable and wind was not excessive. Is that correct?
Yeah, and follow the other guidelines that are in here.
Okay, the only question I have is if they don't have to get approval from the county administrator, John, is there a provision in here that would allow them to know or to who to contact to check on the excessive wind and the air quality?
As far as in here, I don't know if there's a provision in here about who they would contact on that. My assumption would be that would be the Fire Prevention Division or the Director of Air Quality, or possibly, probably both, actually.
I would think the director, of air quality, because that's the issue here. And they would know, all right, the wind's doing this, the wind's doing that, we can't do it. And to simplify, instead of going to two different places, go to one place.
Okay, I think I'm becoming more clear on what you're asking for. We have Gil Bergman with Public Health.
Thank you. In this modification, would the property owner still need to apply for a burn permit? Or do they just have to contact us and ask what the conditions are? Because currently all burning requires a burn permit.
If they have to get a burn permit and come to you to say, we want to do this, I don't want them just do it willy-nilly. I want people to know what they're doing. I just want them to have permission to do it.
I agree. I think a permit's going to always be required.
So perhaps, this is Alan House, Assistant County Administrator, so perhaps a permit, and if it's on, what you're suggesting, Commissioner, is if it's on an agricultural parcel, that it's allowable at any point in the year to seek a permit, and that permit then would be granted provided the air quality conditions were sufficient for burning. Is that getting at what you're?
Correct.
Kathleen Von Etchen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner.
No, I don't have any comment. I
apologize. And then I have M. Weckworth.
This is Mark Weckworth. I'm environmental engineer with the Division of Air Quality. One thing I would like to ask, because I was involved in this incident last year, what criteria are we to give for the burn permit? Because the applicant last year wanted either a 60-day burn permit to burn anytime within 60 days, or 20 consecutive 3-day permits, when the actual open burn season was only open for an additional 30 days.
I would think we'd have to come up with a time frame of when they could do it and how long they could do it. I don't know if that'd be 2 or 3 days. I would think if I'm the owner of the property, I want to clean it up as fast as possible and still follow the guidelines and the time frames and the hours that you're allowed to burn.
And
we offered him, excuse me, I'm sorry. We offered him a 3-day permit the first day we were out there, and he said that wasn't good enough.
Well, because he couldn't burn that many trees in 3 days.
So then we create a flexibility for staff to be able to accommodate the duration needed. Would that be correct?
I would think that it, and this doesn't happen that often. So each incident is going to be a little bit different. It would take a longer than 3 days to do what happened last time, but in most storms, it doesn't take 3 days. But in the situation that we had last time, in fact, some of the trees are still down on the golf course. So you couldn't get it done in 3 days, and as asking for 60 days too much probably, but we need to be a little bit lenient so they can clear their property.
I think with regard to the time frame, we need to keep that in the context of the severe weather event only. Does that make sense? Because we have time frames around everything else.
Yes.
So if there were a way, Mr. Khalil or Ms. Brown to add that to the modification, that we're going to allow staff to work with the applicant for the time flexibility needed to complete the required burning. If that can be a phrase or sentence added into that portion of this section.
Yeah, I think that's possible, Commissioner. I'm just wanting to make sure I'm clear on what we're looking for here. So we're wanting some flexibility in a time frame around a storm.
Correct. And I think
Okay.
so in the event of a severe weather event, then everything that the modification we're requesting is tied to severe weather only and would include the duration of a length of a permit could also be adjusted is what I'm adding just to try to cover all the bases. And then I just have a very general question. We are modifying a county health code, correct? So this is a county-wide, not a citywide resolution, correct?
Yes, this is municipal, or this is Unified Government Code Section 3-17. And section, I think there's a modification to Section 3-3 as well.
But it's applicable countywide, not citywide. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So in other words, it pertains
I would think.
in Bonner and Edwardsville.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, I'm just seeking that as clarification for my own purposes.
Yep.
Alan Howes, go ahead.
Commissioners, so if I'm hearing this, there's sort of two pieces. There's the severe weather allowance, which is in the revised language that allows the county administrator to set an additional burn period, regardless of the type of property. So whether that's a residential property or agricultural property, or in the case, for example, the golf course, that's a commercial property. So we've got that severe weather piece, I think, is handled in the language. And then there's a second piece, which is around the agricultural parcels and the allowance of burn activities on agricultural parcels at any point during the year, provided they get a permit for that allows, and the weather conditions allow. Am I hearing that, or is there a sort of an additional piece where that agricultural burn is also only under severe weather?
I believe it's severe weather related only.
If you'll let me do it where it's not severe weather, I'd push that too, but I don't think you'd let it happen.
You all set the policy, Commissioner.
I believe it should be tied to severe weather with the modification that you just outlined, Alan, and the additional modification of the ability for the unified government to work with the applicant to determine the length of time needed for the permit such that they can complete the needed burning.
Okay, works for me.
In severe weather only.
Can I make that motion?
Yes, please.
All right, I'm making that motion with all the modifications you and I just said.
Thank you. Is there a second on this item?
Mr. Ramirez, second.
This is Commissioner Bynum. Again, I ask if we believe this should be fast tracked.
No.
Okay, so you say just let it come to the next regular.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Okay, further discussion? Any comments from the public on the item?
No comments were received.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Groneman,
Aye.
Kane,
Aye.
Markley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Ramirez,
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye. And it carries. Thank you so much, staff, for your continued work on bringing us to a resolution on that. I really sincerely appreciate it.
I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner, also for your work on it. We have item 5, a resolution for extension of our state of emergency. This is extending the state of our local health emergency for the county of Wyandotte through July 1, 2022. This has been requested for fast track to March 31. And I believe we have Matt May with emergency management present. Mr. May.
Good evening, Commissioner. I am here. Just really quickly, all you folks have probably seen this before. You can see by the resolution, we've gone through this many steps. I believe we're on day 747 of continuous emergency status, which is never a great thing to talk about, but it is important because it allows us access to an ability to receive reimbursement for expenses that are COVID related. And what we'd like to do is continue our own local state of emergency, so it coincides with the national state of emergency, which is in the resolution that the White House pushed out just last week. So they're going to continue that till July 1. I would like to have our status match that. And so this resolution is to continue that emergency status until July 1 of this year.
Excellent. Thank you. Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Commissioner Bynum. I feel I have to say this. This does not create any mandates of any sort. No mask mandate, nothing. This just allows us to reimburse expenses that we incur that are COVID related. I just wanted to clarify that for the community that is watching. Thank you.
Thank you for that. It's important to reiterate. Are there questions or comments otherwise from our standing committee members? Any comments from the public on the item?
No comments were received.
All right, I will take a motion, please.
Motion to approve, Commissioner Ramirez.
Markley, second.
Thank you very much. We have a motion and a second. Roll call on the item.
Roll call, Groneman,
Aye.
Kane,
Aye.
Markley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Ramirez,
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. May.
Thank you, commissioners.
Item 6. It's our last item. It's the second revised item for us tonight. It's a request for approval of local matching funds to move forward with the Bi-State Sustainable Reinvestment Corridor Grant. I believe we have Melissa Bynum and Ron Achelpool with Mark has been in our attendees.
He's
and
still there, Commissioner. We just need
perhaps
him
we
to promote
could promote Mr. Achelpool from Mark. And Melissa, go ahead and get us started.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. Melissa Bynum, Assistant County Administrator. I am actually going to turn this over to Ron, who is with Mid-America Regional Council, to discuss this bi-state corridor plan, which is also a RAISE grant, as we were discussing earlier. And this one is kind of moving a bit all over the place, but I think Ron is on top of it. And I know our mayor's office and Commissioner Bynum have also been involved. So Ron, I'm going to turn it over to you. Are you able to share your screen? Here we go. All right, can we hear you, Ron?
You should be able to hear me now.
Yes.
Am I okay?
Absolutely.
Great.
Okay,
Thank,
great. Thank you.
thank you for having me this evening. Before I start, Ron Achelpool, I'm the Director of Transportation and Environment for the Mid-America Regional Council. I'd like to acknowledge a couple of the committee members that are also board members at MARC. Commissioner Johnson is our board chair, and Commissioner Markley is also a member of the MARC board as well. And thanks for the opportunity to share with you the concept for the bi-state reinvestment corridor, as well as a request for your participation in a grant application that we're working on behalf of the region. Let me make sure I can advance the slides. There we go. So the corridor is intended to connect activity centers, employment centers, and neighborhoods that and communities that may have experienced economic distress historically throughout the region. And so this is a map showing the extent of the corridor from really the Village West area in Wyandotte County, connecting the Quindaro neighborhood, downtown Kansas City, Kansas, downtown Kansas City, Missouri, out to the Independence Square in Independence, Missouri. This is a concept that was really developed under the leadership of Congress members Davids and Cleaver in anticipation of the infrastructure bill that passed, and with a desire to create a concept that could attract federal dollars to the region by promoting a bi-state corridor concept. The kind of theory of change that we're working on is with this concept is that the infrastructure bill and hopefully other legislation that Congress may take up really provide a really important generational opportunity to advance a lot of different infrastructure needs in the region, that by creating a concept that focuses this on an east-west corridor that connects both sides of the state line, that's an opportunity to attract significant resources to the region. It's also an opportunity to advance planning that communities have already done along the corridor, and that by doing this, that we will be able to help the corridor, help the region by catalyzing economic growth and development throughout the region. The proposals being developed in partnership with local governments along the corridor, including Unified Government, City of Kansas City, Missouri, Jackson County, Missouri, Independence, Missouri. I don't have Sugar Creek's, Missouri's logo on this slide, but they are participating in this along with the KCATA and the Mid-America Regional Council. This is a concept that was really unveiled publicly last month on Veterans Day. There was an event held on the Missouri side of the state line to really announce this, and it did get a lot of favorable media coverage. But it's really important to note this is still an early concept. It's going to evolve over time. It's been evolving as we've been working to develop a proposal for a RAISE grant. It's going to be very important that as we do this work along the corridor, that we're working closely with all of the local partners to really engage the community to help shape the corridor concept. Once again, I've said this several times, we believe that this kind of concept could serve as a magnet to attract more federal dollars to the region than we might otherwise have without it. And that this is not the only game in town, that this concept is important, should attract federal resources, but there will be other ideas about these federal dollars, and you've talked about some of them earlier this meeting, and other parts of the city, other parts of the region will benefit by having this concept in the region. I'll just go really quickly through some of the things that we're looking at with this proposal. I'll focus back in on the transportation elements of it, but it's important to note that this is intended to look at lots of different types of infrastructure, ranging from transportation to housing, green infrastructure, broadband, et cetera. In terms of transportation, we're really focused on the zero emission elements of the corridor. It's an opportunity to advance deployment of electric buses or zero emission buses as part of the bus fleet. There's charging infrastructure that would accompany that. We're looking at opportunities to tie in transit centers along the corridor, tie those into the neighborhoods through better pedestrian connections for bicycles and pedestrians. And we've already heard about a number of the funding opportunities out of the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And we've talked about several of these. There's also some more traditional Federal Transit Administration program funds that we might be well positioned for by pursuing a planning grant at this point. In terms of housing, we're interested in how to use transportation and link it to affordable housing throughout the region. There was really very few dollars in the infrastructure bill that touches this, but we're hoping that there will be future legislation that provides more resources. Similarly, with the broadband access program, there's opportunities to expand middle mile and trunk line fiber optic connectivity along the corridor, but we'll also be looking for opportunities to promote digital inclusion, and that may be other strategies to help with affordability for access to broadband along the corridor. We'll be looking at opportunities for green infrastructure, including stormwater best management practices, tree canopy, renewable power generation, electric vehicle charging along the corridor. There's a real strong desire to also couple this with workforce development opportunities. The KCATA in particular is very interested in developing training programs that allow their mechanics and their operators to have a better sense on how to manage and maintain electric buses and the infrastructure associated with them. And so there are opportunities to partner with community colleges and other educational institutions around the region. And then there's also opportunities to look at embedding safety and security, public safety and security provisions into the corridor. We've had conversations with emergency services in the jurisdictions along the corridor and have identified needs for license plate readers, closed circuit TV cameras, potentially expanding a system called ShotSpotter that's been deployed in the Kansas City, Missouri side, and looking at opportunities to embed those in other proposals where they're eligible. So just very quickly, some of the near-term opportunities to advance the corridor. Actually, at MARC, we have the call for projects for our traditional suballocated federal funds, the Surface Transportation Block Grant, Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Program funds, and the Transportation Alternative Program funds. Those applications are actually due to MARC at the end of the week. And so we didn't talk much about that in this meeting, but are hoping that some of the partner jurisdictions may take advantage of that opportunity along the corridor. The one that we're really focused on tonight is the RAISE grant. And as has been said earlier, this is a discretionary program. It's an annual call for projects, so this will not be the last time to potentially apply for it, but the deadline for this round is April 14th. We're looking at a proposal for a planning grant that would be done in 3 phases. The first one would be to really refine the corridor concept and how the transportation elements tie to other elements that we've talked about. Then a second phase to do a more project development and environmental clearance on some of the transit elements and probably sidewalk and bike ped elements along the corridor. And then a third phase to really drill down and do some preliminary engineering on some of the transit facilities along the corridor. There's also currently out an opportunity to advance electric buses through the NOLO program. And we're looking at other opportunities on the Missouri side. The state is working on distributing their ARPA dollars. And so we're looking at opportunities there for broadband. The proposal that we put together would really be a $7 million total planning grant, and we'd be looking for the unified government to be able to provide up to $350,000 to match that. We're currently working with other partners on their match share as well, but that's the contribution that we would be looking for in this application. And I know I've covered this very quickly. It's late in the meeting. I'd be happy to answer any questions about the proposal and the RAISE grant request in particular.
Commissioner Kane.
Thank you. So our investment, what's the total investment?
The total cost of the planning grant's estimated at $7 million.
And our investment's only 350,000?
Yes, that would, each of the governments along the corridor would be contributing to the match for the federal funds.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Commissioner Bynum. A couple questions. I'm sure it was more out of our hands locally. I'm sure it was more so Congressman Cleaver and Congresswoman Davids who mapped out the corridor. Who was involved in choosing the mapping out of the corridor, I should say?
So the actual map of the corridor has evolved a little bit over time. The original proposal was based around the some of the transit routing that's in the region Smart Moves public transit vision, which was adopted back in 2017. And there are several routes in Wyandotte County that are included in that as in terms of east-west connectivity. The Leavenworth Road and Quindaro Parallel and State Avenue are the routes that are identified in that plan. On the Missouri side, Independence Avenue and Truman Road were identified as a corridor for fast and frequent service as well. City of Independence has asked for that alignment to be revisited as part of this plan. And so I think that will be one of the early steps in the planning process, will be to identify exactly where we want to really focus the transit investments that we'll be looking at for the corridor.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I know this has probably taken a lot of planning in, and it would be a disservice to my district as I represent south of that, Argentine and Rosedale. Like I said, it'd be a disservice if I didn't advocate that if there are opportunities along the way to find ways to incorporate in some way, shape, or form in the future, not in the now, but in the future, incorporate that area. Argentina has had in the recent years a surge in economic development, and Rosedale as well with the KU and other opportunities. It's another way to continue that economic development, especially for Argentina. Argentina is that area, my district, is a very heavily Latino community in Argentina. And so I would make sure that that the economic development is spread out across and is equal, because as we know, Quindaro and all of the eastern portion of the eastern part of our community has seen a lot of disinvestment. And so I ask if we see if we see opportunities in the future to some way, shape, or form connect Argentine or Rosedale, or see any of opportunities that way, we at least try and look into it. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And actually, there may be opportunities with this grant to do some of that as well. I think it's important to note, and I breezed right past it, there are many north-south connections that are also important along this corridor. We're really focused on east-west, but how this corridor ties into the rest of the region will be something that we'll be looking at, particularly in the early stages of the planning work.
Commissioner Johnson, you had your hand up, but it's not up now.
I will defer to Mr. Murray and then come behind him.
Excellent. Lavert Murray, please. Lavert, you are muted.
I thought I just.
Oh.
Well, I'm glad it's not just me that's having muting problems.
I understand. Lavert,
Okay, I think I'm now off mute, am I not?
Very good. Please go.
Okay, thank you. And I wanted to address Commissioner Ramirez's question as well. If you looked at the earlier map associated with the Sustainable Green Corridor, you would find linkages to the corridor site that extended or does extend to Rosedale and Argentine. I believe there was an extension following 7th Street out to the Med Center. Excuse me. And so the map that, excuse me, that is before you tonight doesn't show those linkages, but I can assure you in all of my discussions with Congressman Cleaver and Congresswoman Davids, they anticipate at least as much federal activity outside of the corridor as they anticipate within the corridor. And so for that to happen, it would rely on those north-south linkages. And I'm sure Mr. forgive me for butchering your name, Archipole.
That's
Would
correct.
agree with that?
Yes, that's that
Um,
on both counts. Yes.
Okay, thank you. But staff has had some involvement in trying to make sure we can achieve the greatest benefit out of having the corridor follow the route that you see it following today.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. I was going to chime in on the availability of plentiful opportunities for extension into particularly the Rosedale area. So Commissioner Ramirez, you're spot on with those comments. And Commissioner Johnson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I appreciate it, Chair Bynum. And thank you to Mr. Acapole for the presentation. Certainly, I've already heard this at least 2 or 3 times. Anytime that we can leverage federal dollars, I say we've been talking about that all evening long already. And so, and of course, I know the mayor has weighed in as well in terms of looking at some of the disinvested areas of our community, specifically with regard to Quindaro. There's been a lot of talk about investment in the Northeast. We've not seen as many dollars actually being planted there yet. And so, we have in past administrations, but certainly in recent years. And so I certainly agree and look forward to this. We are in the planning stages of this, and there will be plenty of time to kind of sharpen our pencils in terms of the direction and how this will impact both or all communities that are involved with that. But I certainly look forward and support this particular item there. So with that, I do motion for approval as submitted.
Thank you, Commissioner. Is there a second to the motion?
Kane, second.
Thank you, Commissioner. One question. The commitment of the match is only in play if the grant is awarded. Is that correct, sir?
That's correct.
Thank you very much. Any comments from the public on the item?
No comments were received.
Excellent. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Groneman,
Aye.
Kane,
Aye.
Markley,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Ramirez,
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye. And that motion carries. Thank you, Ron, for your time with us tonight. Really appreciated. Thank you, Board Member Groneman, for your time with us tonight. That does conclude our Public Works and Safety Standing Committee meeting. We are adjourned in that capacity. I am turning it over to Commissioner Angela Markley for Administration and Human Services.
But friends, the fun is not over yet. There's more fun to be had. Before I call this meeting to order, I want to announce that due to COVID-19, some committee members, staff, and the public are attending remotely via Zoom as well as on site. All participants joining by phone should mute their phones when not speaking to avoid background noise. During the meeting, please make sure you announce yourself by name and title every time you speak so the public that is observing knows who is speaking. This is critical given the number of remote participants and this current guidance from the Kansas Attorney General. The public is allowed to participate by Zoom or submit comments by email prior to the meeting, and those comments will be included in the record of the meeting. The public may also indicate their intent to provide remote comment by contacting the clerk's office by 5 p.m. the Thursday before the meeting. The public also will have an opportunity to provide brief comments either by telephone or via Zoom or from the lobby of the municipal office building. I will now call this meeting of the Administration and Human Services Standing Committee to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Roll call, Kane,
Aye. Here.
Johnson,
Here.
Ramirez,
Here.
Bynum,
Here.
Markley.
Here, thank you. There are no revisions to tonight's agenda, so our first order of business is approval of the minutes from our December 6, 2021 meeting. Is there a motion for approval?
Mr. Ramirez, move to approve.
Johnson, second.
And we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Kane,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Ramirez,
Aye. Sorry.
Bynum,
Aye.
Markley.
Aye, thank you. Our first item is a proposal, a draft remote worker policy. And I think Renee Ramirez and Chiquita Christian are here to present potentially.
Yeah, this is Alan House, Assistant County Administrator. I'll kind of kick this one off, or
Thanks,
kick both
Alan.
of these off, and then turn it over to Human Resources. For the first one, the remote worker policy. So really, as we emerge, knock on wood, hopefully from COVID, we are seeking to kind of update our policies and workplace practices that became commonplace and part of how we learned how to do business over the course of COVID. And one of those that was really critical to the ability to continue to provide services and to do work was remote work. We quickly transitioned at the beginning of the pandemic to provide opportunities and access for those who could work remotely to do so. And we recognized, as we're now 2 years into it, that we don't have a section in our human resources policy that specifically speaks to remote work. And so as this becomes something that is both commonplace across organizations and something that new employees can also come to expect in workplaces, that now is the time to take stock of what we've learned from that and to put a policy in place in our own human resources guide around remote work. So that is the draft proposal to the human resources guide that you see here this evening. I will turn it over to Renee Ramirez, Director of Human Resources, to provide an update. And she has been supported in this by Z Bishop from UG Legal Department. Renee?
Thank you, Alan. As Alan mentioned, the policy draft that we bring forward to you is to address some of the things that we've been doing for the last 2 years, remote working. This also is going to allow us to bring some type of standardization across the organization for this type of work. So we'll start off with definition of the remote work. Many organizations or many companies use remote work. It's also known as work from home or telecommuting. Basically, it's a type of flexible working arrangement that allows employees to have an alternative work location outside of the traditional office environment. I do want to stress, though, that having this alternative work location in no way modifies the unified government employees' residency requirement. An overview of the policy is that remote work is going to be at the discretion of the employer. Remote work is not available for all classifications within the unified government workforce, and department directors and/or managers would be the ones to determine which employees are eligible and under what circumstances if they can remote work. We will also be requiring remote work agreements from departments to have their employees complete once a determination has been made that a department is going to allow remote work. In this policy, we're going to offer 3 types of remote work arrangements. The first is going to be regular remote work, where with approval, it may range from 1 to several days per week and or in a certain pay period that an employee would have an alternative work location. There's also episodic remote work. With approval, there may be specific projects or work assignments or life events that a director may want a specific worker to do. And this would give opportunity to really provide focus for that episodic, that specific work assignment. And the last one is the emergency proclamation. This is for the continuity of operations during emergencies as determined by our mayor and or our commissioners, or as determined by the county administrator. These past couple of years, we have been, especially during the heightened timeframe of COVID, we've kind of been working under that proclamation. We are going to outline some expectations and responsibilities for our employees as we engage in this new work idea for remote work. Once department directors and or managers have received the approval from an assistant county administrator, or in some instances, the interim county administrator, depending on who they directly report to, departments will then start collecting the remote work agreements with their employees. But again, we want for department directors to actually submit an action plan to their ACAs or again, the interim county administrator. So that way, our administration knows the type of remote work that a specific department is going to have their employees work. Employees will be required to comply with all unified government policies, standard operating procedures, and any directives, just as though they were working in the office. We are going to only allow virtual meetings to occur if an employee is working remotely. No in-person meetings at the employees' or managers' homes. It is also expected that the employee will maintain a satisfactory level of performance and be productive throughout their regular scheduled workday. Employees are also going to be prohibited from engaging in any other gainful employment during the employee's regular unified government work schedule. This next slide represents expenses, hardware, software, and supplies that may come about with working remotely. If an employee has some minimal expenses, they will need to present those minimal expenses to their department director and or manager. And at that time, the department manager or director could approve those minimal expenses to come out of their respective department budgets. The Department of Technology may also provide some type of, piece of equipment for the employees to use, such as, a regular keyboard, a mouse or earbuds, so that way they can participate in meetings and those types of things in order to complete their work assignments. Employees must have functioning internet service, and the unified government is not going to reimburse remote workers for having the internet service. Most importantly, we want to ensure that any employee, those that are eligible to who are going to be able to remote work, that they adhere to the responsible use of information technology policy. I envision that when a employee or department head determines that an employee is going to be eligible for this type of work assignment, that the department would check with human resources to see if the employee is in compliance with the reasonable use of information technology policy. This is a mandatory training for all unified government employees, and they have to be retrained on this policy every 5 years. We do have to address workers' compensation liability and insurance regarding this as well. Coverage by workers' compensation or in the fire department situation injury on duty policy for a bona fide job-related work injury occurring at their home during defined work period could be a compensable injury that we would have to address. Remote workers would be required to prove a causal connection between work and the injury itself. Any employee claiming a work-related injury while remote working will need to go through an investigation to determine the compensability of the claim, that they are issuing with unified government. UG is not liable for any injuries to family members, visitors, or others in the employee's alternative work location, and employees would be responsible to replace any UG equipment assigned to them that becomes damaged beyond normal wear and tear. We also would be recommending that department directors have some kind of checkoff list on what they are assigning out to employees to use for remote work, and also having some kind of clause in there that if they should, break or lose the equipment, that they would have to work with the unified government in replacing that. Modifications and termination of remote work. Again, remote work agreements may be modified or adjusted or even terminated for any reason by a unified government director and or manager, and employees likewise may request that the work agreement be modified, adjusted, or terminated. Department directors will always have the authority to reassess any employee's eligibility to continue to remote work as situations change. What are the benefits of remote work? Well, there are several benefits that we see that come from remote work. It's important to implement measures that retain top talent that we have in our workforce. Having the option for an alternative work location for eligible employees also allows us to be competitive in the market. It recognizes the work-life balance that many of our employees value today. And adapting to new work expectations is a change for local governments, as it breaks the traditional mold that we're accustomed to, that, we're so used to just working in the office. It also allows us to embrace our differences, our values, and our cultures of our employees. I like to think of this as, if we continue to limit ourselves to what we are comfortable with, which is the traditional work styles of office work, then we lose the perspective of what is possible. We don't know what other opportunities will open up for us as a municipality to provide another level of service to our community. So I think having that openness to embrace a change of this nature is very healthy for our organization. It recognizes and accepts, the organization recognizes that people do have different work styles. And it's a way for us to brand the unified government as a premier employer in Wyandotte County. What we will continue to do, adopting this type of a policy in our human resources guide will continue to show how we value the work styles of our employees. It will always show our commitment to always striving for the excellence in services that we provide to our community. It shows respect for each other no matter where we office, in office, or have a hybrid work plan. And most importantly, we will continue to be one team, one UG WICO KCK. Thank you for consideration of this policy, and I'll take any questions at this time.
Thank you, Renee. I think definitely the job market right now is a pretty crazy place. And the reality is that I would say that craziness is driven in part by people's demands for a more flexible work environment. And so it is really critical for us to retain top talent, even if it might not be what we prefer or the work method that we would adopt for ourselves or would want to adopt. If there were no other issues at play, the reality is that there are other issues at play, and we really need to do what we can to support and retain our talent here at the Unified Government. So I'm certainly in favor of this, and I appreciate your presentation. I have Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Commissioner Markley. I second everything that Commissioner Markley said. With COVID, our workforce has changed, and what our workforce looks like and what work looks like. And so I think we as a organization, we have to be responsive and flexible in that manner to bring in top talent, to keep us as a premier employer within our community, and also to keep our employees happy. Some days it might not be the best possible way for an employee to come in to work. They might want to stay at home. They might need a day to just be with themselves while they do their work. It opens our ability to, when I was working in our Parks and Rec, we always put mental health first with our employees. Mental health is important, and this policy allows that ability. And so thank you, Renee, and your staff, and for bringing this forward and really looking at our workforce and saying what we need to adapt to what is being changed. And I honestly think even without COVID, I think we would have still gotten to the point where we are now with remote work and just how workforce is changing overall. So I want us as an organization to be adaptive to that. So thank you for bringing this forward, and I definitely do support this. One question I have, and it might be hard to answer, but is there an estimation of how many employees might be eligible for a work from home agreement?
Well, I think that's still to be determined. We are, going to have to look at probably the non-essential personnel to start off with. At this time, we don't know which departments are still working remotely or have those situations in place still. So I think, again, this brings us to the point of really standardizing this new way of doing business. And I think we'll be able to determine that once we figure out kind of where our departments are sitting at today.
Okay, then I figured that you all were still evaluating, but overall, thank you for being responsive and adaptive to the outside and what's happening. And I look forward to seeing how well this keeps our community and it keeps our employees engaged.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Clerk, were there any comments from the public or any questions from the lobby?
Johnson, move for approval.
And no comments were received.
Thank you. I'll take a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Kane,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Ramirez,
Aye.
Bynum,
Aye.
Markley.
Hi, thanks so much. We are on to item number 2, which is an update on the fiscal impact of minimum wage at $18 per hour. I believe Renee is presenting this one as well.
I'm going to be turning this over to Shakira Christian and Alan.
I'll just open it up and then turn it over to Shakira Christian, the manager in HR. So this is a follow-up informational only item from the commission discussion on $15 an hour. And as you'll hear in the presentation, we've successfully executed that policy. And so the commission had asked for additional information on the fiscal impacts of $18 and $20 an hour. And so coming back to you this evening with additional information on that per your request. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Christian.
Thank you, Alan. If I can get my screen to progress. So the items that we'll discuss are the factors driving increase in minimum wage, excuse me, an overview of the employees impacted and the recent $15 an hour adjustments made. We also will discuss the budget impact of $18 and $20 per hour minimum wages for unified government employees, talk a little bit about compression and then other workforce implications. The factors driving the increase in staff minimum wage, of course, is recruitment and retention as one of those. As you all are familiar, that the labor market is a tough place to be right now for employers. And so we're looking at methods to help us to recruit and retain top talent. The external market average salaries have increased over time. If you look at areas even such as fast food, Walmart, they're paying some competitive wages that even rival some of the wages that we have here at Unified Government. Inflation and cost of living has gone up. The last CPI numbers I found from October of 2020 to 2021 is at about 6.4, which is higher than what we've seen in previous years, and usually increases around 2 to 4% is what we've seen prior to this. UG compensation is currently behind market as well. We have been for some time, but these issues are compounding that even more. We also want to establish similar starting wages for similar positions within the unified government. As you all are aware, we do have 13 bargaining units, which comprises 13 different pay plans and non-union staff as well. And so having those differing pay plans compete in terms of union negotiations and so forth, it does cause some internal competition. And so if we establish a similar starting wage, it could help with that. It could increase employee motivation and morale. All the studies show that money isn't the number one motivator for employee performance, but we can't ignore that it does contribute to it. So. All right, I do want to go over an overview of all of the classifications and employees impacted by potentially increasing the minimum wage to $18 or $20 per hour. This overview is based on data from our payroll as of January 5th of this year. I kind of wanted to go over the entire year and then kind of talk about what we've done, some of the areas that we will potentially need to change, and then other implications as well. But if we look at the employees earning less than $15 per hour, that was 9 classifications that comprised of approximately 82 employees. There were temporary seasonal employees in that group, several non-union groups. Going back to the temporary and seasonal, it included jobs such as the election workers, school crossing guards, the summer seasonal lifeguards, positions of that nature, which we had a lot of employees in that group. The non-union classifications included administrative support assistants, program aides, and so forth. And then AFSCME, we had caretakers in that role. And like I said, the $15 per hour we have made some adjustments to get those individuals situated and adjusted to that minimum rate. Individuals that fall between $15 per hour and $18 per hour, comprised of 14 classifications and approximately 70 employees, similar temporary employees in that group. We've added some more non-union classifications that fall in that. Additional AFSCME classifications would be added, and then Teamsters employees, as of the payroll of January 5th, were in that group as well. Looking at the group of employees that are between $18 and $20 per hour, there's 32 classifications. Again, a lot of them are non-union, and AFSCME, Teamsters. At the payroll of January 5th, there were some line unit employees in there, but we'll talk about some adjustments that are potentially being made to those groups. So they have approximately 150 in that category earning those wages. So the recent adjustments that we made, again, the minimum wage for non-union staff, they received step increases to place them at $15 per hour. We did not make at this time any adjustments to the salary ranges. We just adjusted those rates across the grid to get them to their minimum rate of $15 per hour. We did increase the pay for summer and seasonal positions, and we have begun recruiting and advertising at that rate. There were 20 election workers whose rate we would increase to $20 per hour. I'm sorry, $15 per hour for those 20 election workers. We had several employees also that worked in the election office as maybe one-off election here and there that we're reclassifying their poll workers, putting them into contingent employee roles that will be paid on a green check through accounting. The election office is working on finalizing those rates for those employees at this time. We have a signed letter of understanding with AFSCME regarding the caretakers that are currently paid below $15 per hour. So there were 7 caretakers that fell below that rate. We would get them to the $15 per hour. We also want to adjust the caretakers on that same range to ensure that there's a tenure spread between, to recognize the tenure spread that they previously had. And just so you know that there were also some pay ranges that were old and inactive that were well below the $15 per hour rate in the AFSCME contract that we did agree to inactivate through this LOU. The LOU has been signed by the union, and we are going to be working to get those individuals compensated to $15 per hour through payroll processing as soon as we can. As far as the budget impact, this table shows 3 different groups of employees based on their rates of pay and their budget impact for increasing at the different levels. So group A is the employees that as of January 5th earned less than $15 per hour. If we bump those individuals, it would cost approximately $134,000. Those same group of employees, if we take them to $18 per hour, it would cost $331,000 on an annualized basis. And then those in that same group going to $20 per hour would cost us $463,000. Group B are the employees that earn between $15 per hour, but less than $18 per hour. This group, if we adjust them to the minimum of $18 per hour, would cost approximately $216,000. If we take them to $20 per hour, that would cost $493,000. And then finally, the group of employees, group C, that is paid at least $18 per hour, but less than 20. their annualized salary cost would be $266,000. If you look at the very last column, it's the cumulative total for each group. So 134 to raise it to $15 per hour, $547,000 cumulative cost for $18 an hour, and 1.2 million a cumulative cost to raise it to $20 per hour. Outside of wages, it would also impact, we would also have extra costs associated with unified government contributions, such as CAPERS, Social Security, FICA, and unemployment. So for those very same groups, if you look at their cumulative totals, we would have to add an additional $14,000 for the $15 per hour minimum wage, an additional $77 for the $18 per hour minimum wage, and an additional $188,000 for the $20 per hour minimum wage. And this last slide is basically the budget impact with the combined base salary plus the UG contributions, $148 for $15 per hour, $148,000, $625,000 for $18 per hour, and $20 per hour. I'm sorry, 1.4 million for $20 per hour. Other things that we have to consider is that there would be potentially ripple effects of employees that supervise certain groups whose the employees that they supervise would now potentially earn more than they do, or that they will be really compressed. Sometimes even in similar positions across the unified government, it would cause some pay disparity. We'd have to do a lot more research in looking into how that would impact at all these various levels. But we do project that it would cost at least an additional 25% on top of the what this budget impact for additional costs associated with compression. So again, the budget impact to address compression is approximately 25%. We would review the chain of command, memorandums of understanding, as well as internal equity to fix any compression issues that happen as a result of those varying levels of minimum wage being impacted. We would need to do a compressive compensation analysis to provide us with where we are comparatively in the relatively to the market. Right now, just fixing the minimum wage is basically piecemealing, so we need to look at the overall compensation structure as well. And then workforce implications, kind of looked at the unions that potentially could be impacted based on adjusting those minimum wages. As I mentioned, there's 7 caretakers that earn less than $15 an hour that have been taken care of via LOU that we will address and finalize. But should we increase the rate to $18 per hour? AFSCME has 27 employees. If we increase the rate to $20 per hour, there's 50 employees in that category. Teamsters contract, there was a recent ratification and signing of the union contract that took their starting rate to $18.50 an hour. So there's no employees currently under $15 per hour in that union. However, if we went with $20 per hour, there will be 18 employees that we would need to address via LOU. LIUNA has no employees under $18 per hour. We have reached a tentative agreement and a final LOU regarding a final LOU that includes a career development plan that pretty much addresses most of those rates of pay to around $20 per hour. The career development plan essentially is a plan whereby employees could gain certain certifications or training and be reclassified to a higher rate of pay and higher classification once they obtain those. We have finalized a red line of their contract that includes that, and we'll be looking forward to getting that finalized and approved soon. IBEW has been, their contract has been ratified and agreed upon, and their rates, there are no employees under $20 at this point for IBEW. They also have a similar career development plan as LIUNA. I will say that there's actually one employee in IDEW, that's at $19.50 per hour. But under the career development plan and COLA next year, they will certainly be above $20 per hour. For non-union, again, we made those adjustments for the $15 per hour. If we go with $18 per hour minimum for non-union, that would impact 21 employees. And if we go with $20 per hour, that would impact 49. So that's all the information that I had to share. I'm open for discussion.
Thanks so much, Shakiva. I will say, not because I want to be a killjoy, but just because I think it's always a confusing way to think of things. You know, all of these numbers are they're on a going forward basis. So what Shakiva has shown us is not a 1-year cost, it's an every year cost. And then assuming we are giving our employees raises annually, as I think we should be, then you're giving raises on top of this ongoing annual cost. So I think a lot of times we see the number and we think that's a one-time payment, but we would have to be paying that annually. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Markley. You know, I have a couple of thoughts on this. One obviously has to do with the cost, obviously, and then the other is that we're dealing with persons' lives here. That you know, hopefully, you know, this could potentially make a big difference in. It's hard for me to talk about increases across the board and then on a consecutive basis without considering the conversations that we've had in recent times about lowering mill levies and the impact that that could have on the budget. And while I'm a fan of both lowering mill levies, et cetera, taxes, and then also in giving our employees, you know, raises that will make them competitive in the market, it's very perplexing, to say the least. I guess the question that I would have is there is an intrinsic cost of losing someone and then having to hire and replace persons that we are losing in a situation we know has to do with the rate of compensation. So if a person is getting paid a certain amount of money, it's not enough for them to live, they go to a competing organization. We then have to rehire for those positions and go through the cost of replacing them. Shakiva, have you and or Renee been able to categorize this in terms of the actual dollars it costs to replace persons when people leave for wage higher wages?
Commissioner, this is Renee Ramirez, Director of Human Resources. We are in the process of trying to determine what the cost per hire is for our organization. And that cost per hire is going to actually change depending on the classification, because the cost per hire for a police officer is going to be much greater than replacing administrative support. And that's because of the training, equipment, things of that nature. So we are trying to come up with that number.
Okay, well, that would really help to, I guess, nuance the conversation and at least help this commissioner to be able to make a more tangible decision with regard to this perplexing issue. It's not going away. We're going to have to continue to deal with this, and we may be at a point in time where we don't have a choice but to increase wages. So with that, Chair, I will yield. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner, and a very good point about the budget implications of these discussions. Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Commissioner Markley, and thank you, Commissioner Johnson. I'm going to come out and say it. We can't eat our cake. We can't have our cake and eat it too. We all know what's on the table, been proposed to us on the table. It's a drastic and unnecessary change to our budget. And that unnecessary and drastic change would put this in jeopardy in some way, shape, or form. Our employees are in City Hall or in home, wherever you work, every day working for this community. We need to do whatever we can to have their back. We need more employees. And so the only way we're going to do that is to pay them what they're worth. Give them what they're worth. And like I said in the beginning, we can't have our cake and eat it too. And our employees need some TLC. I'm willing and prepared to work with the commission to give them the TLC that they deserve. But what's been proposed on the table won't it will leave them behind, and we can't do that. So thank you for bringing this forward. I want to continue having this conversation with the commission, and I want to find the solution that does well for our community, does well for our employees, and is sustainable for us in the future budget wise. Those are the three things I want when we look at this, looking at a minimum wage. Best for the community, best for our employees, and sustainable for us as an organization. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Kane?
I said this 100 times. We need to be a better employer to our employees. I did not know that we had so many employees working for under $15 an hour. I think in order to retain them, to keep them, there's always a cost for training, regardless of what level that they come in. And then after training is can you retain them? Because at some of these McDonald's out there on I-70 going in towards Lawrence, they're paying those people $20 to $21 an hour. I want to hire good people. I want to keep the people that we have. I want to pay them a better wage so they can have a better living themselves. So as the other two commissioners said, you know, we're going to have to bite the bullet and do what's right for our employees.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Bynum?
Director.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Renee.
I just wanted to point out, you know, I appreciate the comments, and you are correct, Commissioner, that, you know, when we hire our employees, we have to look at this as an investment. We are making an investment into the individuals that we're employing here at the unified government. And it's not just on the onset of hiring them. We have to continue that commitment to these employees so that way we get them the proper training throughout their careers here, because we want to provide them with a career, not just a job here at the unified government. So thank you.
Thanks, Renee. Commissioner Bynum?
Thank you, Commissioner Markley. I'm curious. I see Kathleen Von Atchins on the call, and I'm concurring with the remarks of all my fellow commissioners here as this relates to wanting to adequately compensate our employees while being mindful of the, you know, hoped for mill levy reductions that we propose for the coming budget year. So I'm just curious from Kathleen's standpoint, did I understand correctly, as we make our way through continuing the study that Renee and Shakiva have undertaken, this would come into play with our budget cycle that we're working in right now? And would we be able to be shown this within a proposed 2023 budget so that we can see, you know, the total implication of the cost while we do work for trying to find some equitable way to bring some mill levy relief? Does that question make sense? I'd like to hear from Kathleen, I guess.
Well, sure. You know, we can incorporate this work into our budget, you know, analysis. So I think the key point here with regards to the Revenue Act policies that are being, proposed or contemplated is that it has to be done in conjunction with reviewing our headcount and our organizational we're the interim county administrator is undertaking an organizational review to determine whether there's efficiencies that can be gained by reorganizing our departments. And of course, it kind of plays into PBB where we're identifying services that are of low priority that may need to be reduced or eliminated in order to reallocate resources. So, it's a complex question that, you have to balance the revenue policy with the expenditure policy. But then on the other hand, you want to continue to compensate the existing workforce, to the level that keeps them engaged in their work and where they're making enough money to make a living. So it's just a balancing act that we're certainly it's going to be an interesting and challenging level of discussions in the coming months.
Well, I really appreciate that. And I guess what I'm saying is when we are brought a starting point budget document, when a budget draft is brought, could we please see the implications of this in addition to any other changes? And Kathleen, what I'm possibly alluding to specifically is in past years, when you've worked with us on budget retreats, you had a spreadsheet that would change as we manipulated it. And I just wonder if that kind of tool is something that we could maybe have access to as we look at that first draft of a budget. Because, this is a cost that I think we want to support, but we've got to understand its implications. So with that, I'll yield. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Commissioner. All right, so this item is for information only. Clerk, do we have any comments from the public or in the lobby?
No comments were received, but we do have a hand up in the attendees.
Oh, the hand went down. I think definitely the next step, I think, for this discussion, because here it is for information only, is for that discussion to occur during the budget. So I think that this committee is appreciative of the information and looks forward to having budget discussions that incorporate the information that has been presented here tonight so we can see what those impacts might look like. Any final questions? Thank you, team, for your presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner.
All right, our last item is an update from the Appraiser's office. I will recognize Matt Willard.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to visit with this group. I'm here with Jay Robbins, Deputy County Appraiser, to update this committee on our office operations and just give the general overview of what we do. With that being said, if it's all right, I'll share my screen and we will get started.
We can see it.
Everybody see it? All right,
Yep.
We'll go ahead. Anytime I'm talking with any group, I think it's important to state that the appraiser's office doesn't create value. We're not creating demand. We're not creating supply. Market participants determine value by their transactions in the market. We've got the responsibility to analyze those transactions and appraise properties based on what's happening in the market. The 10,000-foot view of what we do is, as of January 1st, discover, list, and value all real and personal property in Wyandotte County. Part of that process is the hearing process, anywhere from informals up to the Court of Appeals. And the end result of that process is our certification of values to the county clerk. This occurs on or by June 1st, and it allows for a calculation of mill levies and an equitable distribution of the tax burden. The statutory framework for this is contained in Article 11 of the Kansas Constitution. It generally sets assessment rates and defines what taxable property is. The Kansas statutes, Chapter 79, cover more of the details on, basically everything we do. And we are overseen by the Kansas Department of Revenue Property Valuation Division. That is the organization that provides rules, guidance, and as well as performing annual audits for statutory and statistical compliance. The WHO, we currently have 25 staff members, 10 in residential, responsible for about 62,000 parcels. We have 4 staff members in commercial, responsible for approximately 5,600 parcels. We do have a personal property division with 7,400 accounts. This is everything from commercial machinery equipment to golf carts to manufactured homes. And we do have 8 administrative personnel who help with data entry and just making sure that everything keeps running. So the general overview here again is we do annually value all real and personal property. That includes annual inspections of approximately 11,000 parcels a year, annual development of cost, market, and income models for commercial and residential property. We also maintain exemption files, including IRB and EDX properties. We coordinate with economic development to help administer the NRA program. And there is a lot of coordination that happens between the appraiser's office and the clerk, treasury, any number of offices related to property tax administration. There's a lot of communication, a lot of working together that happens there. And I know that everybody's aware that our notices of appraised value and classification were mailed on March 15th. It's the annual notice that contains current and previous estimates of value by classification. And also on the back of that form, there's information on how to file an appeal. Just generally concerning appeals, the informal deadline is April 14th this year. There's another opportunity if the taxpayers don't make the informal deadline or just want to appeal later. There's a payment under protest process that's available once the tax bills go out. But concerning the informal appeal process, several ways to request an appeal. Online at the at wykokck.org/AYPVO. Returning the back of the form, that can be in person, that can be via, we've got a fax number, and then simply by calling in and say, I'd like to have a hearing, we'll start that process and get it set. We also accept walk-in appeals. Some initiatives that we've undertaken, recently. This year, there's been a solid focus on public outreach. Part of that is an upcoming event at Memorial Hall, April 9th, from 10 to 2. Just an open format for folks that have questions about their parcel value, about the process. Basically, I think property value related. We'll have folks there available to answer those questions. We've also deployed a new parcel search website at appr.wykokck.org. This website contains property value information to include property record cards, property comp sheets on residential properties, and it also includes mill levy information and tax information going back on all properties. This summer, there is a project that's underway to start using mobile data collection devices. 2 years ago, we started a system to allow for online filing of personal property renditions. That's been very well received. And also this summer, there's a change detection process, analysis process. We contracted a vendor to take our orthophotography and compare 2 years, look for changes and highlight those for us, just in case there are items that we missed. And so the analysis on that's going to pick up this summer as well. We do have a lot of additional information out there. Already discussed the property tax or property search and tax info. We're pretty proud of that here. It was years in the making. I'm real happy with how that turned out. We've also got a great deal of general information about the process available at our UG website, wykokck.org/appraiser. Lots of FAQs, lots of flyers, lots of questions that can be answered there. We've been producing a series of videos that's available on the Unified Government YouTube channel, as well as being posted to various other social media sites. And always, we've got staff available to answer questions that anybody has during business hours and plus a little bit. And that's all we have prepared, and would love to set for questions.
Thanks, Matt. I have Commissioner Bynum.
Thank you. I was curious at your public outreach event at Memorial Hall on, I believe you said April 9. If someone brought their appeal form to that event, are you prepared to accept those at that event?
Prepared to accept them, and actually prepared to hold hearings, assuming the demand isn't too great. So the plan is to have it set up, if somebody wants to do a walk-in appeal at that event, have equipment and people available to allow for that.
Thank you. That's great.
That is great. Any additional questions? All right. That was obviously for information only. Matt, is there some on your website or somewhere that they can get information if they missed that moment where you just told about your in-person event? Will it be in our newsletters also?
I believe it will be going out to the newsletters and on the UG Facebook page. It's been published there. I think that happened today. And so that outreach is just now getting started. But and I believe it will be posted on the UG main page coming up. I don't think that's happened yet.
Okay, perfect. Any last minute questions from the commissioners? If not, we will thank Matt, and that was our final item for the evening. So we will conclude our meeting and we are adjourned. Thanks so much for your attendance and patience.
You're welcome.